Welcome to The Confessional, the new show from Are You Not Entertained, brought to you by Pedal Labs, who are rewriting the playbook for fan engagement, most recently with the groundbreaking Connected British and Irish Lions jersey in collaboration with Connected Fanatics, proof that the future of sport is already here. In this series, Roger Mitchell is joined by a series of remarkable guests for conversations that tackle the questions most people avoid. Raw, revealing, and never predictable. If you want the kind of insight and honesty you simply won't find anywhere else, then join Roger for questions and answers that rarely see the light of day.
Hello, I'm Roger Mitchell, and this is The Confessional. This is a new show of ours that's based around 6 philosophical questions to extraordinary people that will come on every month to try and get behind a little bit the normal and expected answers in the sports business and in general. And I'm just so delighted that the first guest of this show is Elliot Richardson. And for over 5 years now, we've been very, very close friends. Elliot is one of the very, very senior managing directors, partners, founders, whatever you want to call it, in Howden Insurance, the UK's biggest private company, and obviously a major player, top 3 globally in that space. He also is somebody that is much more involved in sport and influential in our sector than people realise. He founded Dugout at a time when social media thinking was nowhere near where it is today. Dugout was absolutely revolutionary in a way that also because all the major clubs in Europe actually were shareholders in a concept to bring together their output under one hub. He folded that into what is now One Football, and that continues to be an excellent company that we'll talk about during the show. I'm just delighted that Elliot, you're with me today, and hopefully we'll have a good one.
Thanks, Roger. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to it.
Let's kick off straight away. The first question in this new show is this one. For what and to whom do you think you need to ask forgiveness, Elliot?
Right, Roger. So, as you very kindly shared these questions in advance, I probably I've never had more difficulty in trying to prepare for a podcast or an interview in my 37 years in business. Actually, they were really interesting questions. I'm sure we'll get into. And on the first one, and as you know, I'm no coward, so I'll do my best to answer these as straight and as honest as I possibly can. I thought about this one a lot, and I've been in business now nearly 37 years. I'm so into my 4th decade of being a businessman, and it's a bit like a batsman batting the session rather than the day. You look at those in different sessions: your first 10, second 10, third 10. Now my 4th 10. A bit like you and I are now at veteran status, which I never thought we'd ever be called veterans, but we are. And I think it's no one individual for me. It's an accumulation of different individuals and also myself to ask for forgiveness for. I think in your first 2 sessions, if you like, your first 2 decades, I was probably more feisty. I know that's something you never are, Rog, but I certainly was more feisty. Way more feisty.
I would love to have seen that.
And so I think the element that you do is you come around and you have certain training, right? Whether that's in your upbringing and your early stage of your bosses, that you're in your first boss. And I think one of the things I've said to you and I said to many people is you have to get lucky in your life to work for people, good or bad, that can shape you. And I think I was very lucky when I started in the Lloyd's market at 16 years old. I was there for 2 weeks job experience at Alexander Howden, which was the forerunner of what became Howden years later. And I think being brought around Lloyd's of London, one of the key things and the key motto in Lloyd's is the Uberem Fides, which is utmost good faith. So if someone didn't act in that way in my life, then I tended to respond quite aggressively compared to probably anything else. And be it a Capricorn, be it anything else you want to call it, And perhaps I would like to apologise and ask for forgiveness for those who've been on the sharp end of my tongue over the last 35, 40 years. And immediately regret it afterwards. And I think as you learn to control your emotions as you get older, you look back and wince at some of those moments. And certainly in my last 10 years, I've been much more the Kofi Annan of insurance and other things, which probably you've known me for the last 5 to 10 years. Definitely a more rounded and acting on not your emotions and anger. And it'll be something I probably will come out more in the rest of this interview. But that's something that I would definitely ask for forgiveness of those and also of myself, where I put myself under enormous pressure, often unnecessarily so. But I guess that shapes you into who you are today. So that's my attempt at that answer. There's no one individual Roger. It's a mixture of myself and a group of people that maybe along the line I've responded and held maybe them up to standards that I hold myself at, that maybe that's not always fair.
Let me follow up on that one. I think that will be the theme of all of these shows, 6 basic questions, but follow up, which is my task to be hopefully good at that. You in your early stage, and this happens a lot to young people who are good, and we've got a lot of young people that follow this podcast. So you're a young man, you start in Lloyd's, people can see that you've got talent. And if I'm not mistaken, Elliot, over these first, what you call your first batting session, you were kind of like sought after quite a lot by different people and different competitors. Do you regret in any way one of the jumps that you made, leaving one company, going to another? Do you think that somebody was maybe disappointed with you doing that? And if you did do that, did you do it for money or did you do it for ambition?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So I've only I've done 37 years in Lloyd's and only resigned 4 times. So it's not like something that you're known for jumping around. When I was in my very early stages, I'm a very, very loyal person for anyone who knows me, almost sometimes too loyal, but you can't change that. And I got the chance at 16, got offered a job after being there for 2 weeks. I was talking to my daughter the other day and laughing about this. You know, Jeremy Clarkson's standing joke every year at A-levels when he says he failed his A-levels and he's on this, that and the other. I actually, I was the first year at GCSEs, 1988, and I got pretty poor exam results, which were appalling. And my boss at the time said to me, look, I want you to go to night school and retake your maths GCSEs. And if you don't get a better grade than the D that you got, then you're not got a job here. So for the next 8 months, I did night school at Havering Technical College, that, you know, great seat of learning, Roger. I'm sure we're right up there with Oxford, Cambridge and University of Glasgow. And worked so hard that I got a U. So I went backwards. I went from a D to a U, and luckily, the week before, the guy who was going to opine on my future career got fired, and he was the only one who remembered saying that if I didn't pass my GCSE. So luckily, my career could have been over very quickly. And then I got lucky because Lloyd's was a great time for young people at that stage, and there was a couple of expressions. And if you have young people listening to your podcast, I think there's an old-fashioned saying that you don't do a man's job on boys' money. And so I was never bothered. I was never bothered because I was learning, but I had my father and other people around him saying, you seem to be getting more and more responsibility, but your wages are not a man's wages or a woman's wages. And so I wasn't too bothered about that. The second one was if you're good enough, you're old enough. And this is something that we use in Howden Re, my main business that we look after in reinsurance, in that we believe that if you're good enough, you're old enough. So, and that's been an expression that's used in football, but we use it all the time. And so I turned down lots of offers. And then the only reason I got the chance to leave was I was about 22, 23 years old. So I'd been doing 7 years at Alexander Howden. And I had a client that started to buy some major reinsurance, and my boss sort of went, well, we should take him out for dinner. I went to the toilet during the dinner. The boss had too many glasses of wine and told my client that he'd just bought himself a new Ferrari off the revenue that I'd created for him. And so in the car on the way home, the client went, "You're going to get a phone call from another firm tomorrow, and you're going to be leaving, and I'm moving the entire book to you." And that was the moment things changed. So I wasn't even looking to leave. I was happy, very loyal. That was the first time I left. The second and third time were a little bit different. So the second time I was getting married and I didn't have enough money to get married. And I got a job offer from somebody else with a good signing on bonus. That would have been enough to have paid for the DJ or whatever it was at the time, Roger. I resigned, and the firm I was working for offered me way more money to stay than I'd been offered. But handshake's important. I could hear my grandfather, father, everybody in my ear saying, you don't shake hands and then don't go. I don't like people who do that. And it's not something I think is, if you've made that decision to walk, you go. And no matter what the consequences. And it was the most stupid thing because I didn't really want to go, but this was the money and I needed it for a particularly stupid reason. So when my kids came to me now and said that, I go, "What are you doing?" And as I walked out the door, the boss said to me, "I'm going to ruin your career because you've said no to me." I was 24, I think. And that comment, the tongue came back saying, "Okay, do you want me to turn the lights out on the way out?" And the next thing, I got a lawsuit about a week later for breaching restrictions, blah, blah, blah. And they wanted to set an example on a 24-year-old person. So that was a bit ridiculous. But that was and then the last one, which was pure emotion, was my third time I resigned, was I absolutely idolized my boss. I would have done anything for him. And he called me in and he said, "You've had the best year of anyone in the firm. You've got the highest bonus. Congratulations." I didn't care. I'm not got a jealous bone in my body. I don't care what other people earn. I'm pleased for my friends. As long as I'm treated fairly, I don't care what anyone else has got. And probably one of the best things I've got in my arsenal is this: don't worry about other people. Just focus on you. And he said, "I'm going to send you a spreadsheet so you can look after all your team. Well done. You should feel pretty good about everything." Walked out of there 12 feet tall, Roger. You've all been on the end of those calls or conversations. And as I got back to my desk, he accidentally sent me everybody else in the firm's bonuses, and I wasn't even in the top 50. So he didn't have to tell me. He didn't have to tell me I had the biggest bonus. I was very happy with my bonus. But that was the moment that was finished. And fortuitously, as I walked out of the office that night, a firm called me and said, "We'd like to talk to you about moving." And I wouldn't have even taken that call. And then I did. We took 100 people. The company sued me heavily, massive profits warning. And again, I wouldn't have left that job in a million years. And that was the most stupid one because that was a company I didn't enjoy at all in the 6 years that I worked there. So sometimes you make them for the wrong. Then luckily, brains come along at different times and it worked out. All of it worked out for a reason in the end. And there's that serendipity and sliding doors moment. But funny, that's the three main reasons I've ever left a job, and all for different reasons. So yeah, I would strongly urge people to think carefully. But once you've made that decision, stick to it.
Yeah, that's great advice. Another phrase we use, and it's a phrase that a lot of people wince at a little bit, but it's still under the first question: bayonet the wounded. How important, Elliot, is the ruthlessness, the ability to leave being a nice guy aside and doing what you need to do for your company, for your employees, for your shareholders? Have you been in situations that you've had to do that and really it's really hurt you?
Yeah, no, I think the worst experience is when you have to get rid of people and have to let them go. Doesn't matter if you don't feel some pain when you do that, then you're not human. And it doesn't matter how many you've done, and I've had to do plenty of them in my time. I remember the first time I did it, I literally couldn't sleep for 4 days. And it's painful, but these are things you have to do. And you always have to say, if the roles were reversed, what would happen? And all I ever say when you have to let go of people is do it with absolute class and dignity and imagine you were in the room when it happens. And it was the other way around. And I think that's the hardest one. I think in terms of ruthlessness, in terms of business, I never go into a deal and try and make money from someone. I try and make money with people. And I think that's the insurance way of doing business. And I love that. And I've probably been overly generous in my life as a result of doing that. However, if people behave badly, then you don't take any prisoners. And if that's the case, you don't wince at doing that. But I promise you, it doesn't come with a lack of feeling, but you have to do what you have to do. And you feel uncomfortable for a while afterwards, you do that. But if you show weakness when people have behaved really poorly, then you're going to get run all over.
Yeah. Let me ask one. This is the confessional, so that I can ask this. You can decide not to answer it or not. Given the example that you've given there about letting people go, you're the chairman of One Football. You see the chief executive taking that company in a direction of NFTs, Web3, new media, at a moment in time where everybody was in a bubble on that. You probably weren't fully behind that strategy. Do you think on reflection you waited too long to make a change?
100%. I think if Martin Sorrell used this expression, so I'm not name dropping, he didn't say it to me directly, but I think people overthink people decisions by 18 months too long on average. And after you've made that decision, you go, why did we take so long to make that decision? But people aren't, it's not an algorithm. It's people. And that's why we overthink it. We overthink, my God, that's the founder in that particular incident and position. Then the founder, it also is why most founders end up being chairmen or chairpersons, because they often are too emotional. They don't want to run the business. Their vision is brilliant. The execution becomes harder as they go through the different increments. Not everybody, but quite a few. And on that one, that was a train coming down the track way earlier, and we should have dealt with it. Luckily, we dealt with it, but just in time. That was, as Wellington said at Waterloo, that was a close run thing. And and so we were late, way too late. So almost beyond overtime. Yeah,
you and I know, because you told me that what you had to do to save that and save all those people's jobs. And one of the things that I love so much about One Football, apart from their sponsors of the summit, is that it could have been so different if you had dealt with that weekend differently, Elliot. And I don't even need to go into the details because a lot of it is obviously, but that was an amazing weekend, and kudos to you. Let me segue into the second question, the second philosophical question, which may be this or may not be this. What's the deal you wish you hadn't done, Elliot?
Well, it's on a similar theme. Without doubt, the deal I shouldn't have done was Dugout. And founding Dugout without absolutely any and I'll explain to the audience and you, I think you know a little bit about this. So I was involved in sport through different things that were happening, and I like de-risking projects, right? When you come from the insurance world, a bit like your book, Roger, key term is risk, right? Dealing with risk every day. And while we're lucky enough to have a lot of great friends in common, is because if you talk to them about insurance, they think you're the man from the Pru. But if you talk to them about risk, everyone starts to lean in and start to talk to you. And we in Howden call ourselves more risk advisors, risk and capital advisors, than we do insurance or reinsurance people. That's a transaction that happens to protect risk. But risk is something you deal with every day. So I enjoy it. I love trying to solve a problem, and involved in a lot of that still in sport, in other things, which we can talk about later. But with, I was involved in a project which was a really clever idea, and it came to me via a friend. So it wasn't my idea. And the idea, and I still love it. And in fact, Todd Bowley mentioned this not long ago from Chelsea, was the fact there was a lack of an all-star game in football. And the idea was to create an all-star game, physical all-star game, where fans throughout the season could vote for who played in the game. And it was Europe versus the rest of the world. unbelievably complex, Roger, right? It was getting clubs to release the players, calendar, you can imagine insurance on that amount of talent. But it was a really interesting project. And the idea of creating that much data was a little bit of a kernel that came later on Dugout and now on One Football, without doubt. And so we got unbelievably far on this particular project. And it was why we were working with some of the clubs. We got involved in people like FIFA and UEFA sanctioning the game. Really an interesting project. And then it came down to raising capital. And there were two particular individuals. One was a household name, highly respected, who wanted to put the capital in. And the other person was not such a household name and had such a stellar reputation. And I sent a note to my friend who was the owner. I said, look, even though the terms are not as good, this is going to come under huge scrutiny. I'd pick number one every day because number two is going to be a problem. And he forwarded that email to number two.
Why?
No idea to this day, Roger. So the next thing, number two came back and said, the only way I'm going to continue with this project is if Elliot's not involved. And all he is just an insurance broker. Well, to say that pissed me off, Roger, was an understatement. I spent 18 months on this project. We got a long way down the line. Sorry to swear in the confessional box. But anyway, I walked. So I phoned the guy and said, I'm very sorry you got the email, but I'm standing by everything I said and I'm walking. Good luck. And it got nowhere. Deal fell over. But I was so annoyed. That's why I started Dugout. I started Dugout with anger and a view to get one back on somebody. So never do that. Never do that. It's just such a terrible lesson. And it's you realize that you've got probably not the right idea, probably not the right business model, but all of it, you're in denial because you're pissed off and because you're annoyed. So you don't listen to the logical side of your brain. And I'm quite a logical guy, and that allowed me to do that. Then, of course, I got everybody saying, you'll never get this done. The clubs will never form a company. So then you got a point to prove and the stubbornness comes out. And so all of these reasons should have been massive warning signs to say, don't do it. But off you went. So 2.5 years of your life. And then miraculously, we get it done. But then the model wasn't right. You wrote about it. Other people wrote about it.
But
you don't
nobody's model was right early in those days. We were all feeling our way. We were all feeling our way.
And by the way, the industry still is.
Still is.
And being brave enough but when you start taking other people's capital and you got your friends and other people, then the responsibilities become enormous, right? And going back to your earlier question about a founder, the number one lesson when you set up a business is you are the last off the ship if you've taken other people's capital. You protect them first, and your shareholders are everything. Your investors are everything. And I've done it in every other business I've ever been involved in. But this creates a lot. Bear in mind, I didn't need to do it. I had a fantastic career. Life was great. I didn't need to. It was just a burning position to prove people wrong and to get someone back. Never a good lesson. The other lesson on Dugout was never build a business to try and sell it. Build a great business, and if there's a knock on the door, you get a knock on the door. But build a business to sustain and go long. Luckily, all of this has ended up being a journey into now what football is, which is all the great things that have happened and all the relationships I've got. I'm enormously pleased with, but it's a deal I wish I'd never done, Roger. Definitely. And that's not to say now I'm not immensely proud of where we are as a business, the people that work there, the investors we work with every day. It's brilliant. But good God, 9 years of your life based off of anger and illogical reasons is definitely not a good move. Let's dig into that a little bit, because I was thinking about this and I was trying to guess what your answers were going to be to these 6 questions and have follow-ups. So I was thinking, you think people like Michael Jordan, Larry Bird, and you see all these clips, especially these days, where somebody's badmouthed them and they just go crazy and they drop 50 or 60 on them just because somebody's said the wrong thing at the wrong time.
honestly, really honestly, you say never do these things in anger, but you know that old phrase, you know, chips on the shoulder, chips in the bank. How much do you need that kind of fuel? How much do you need a rival, somebody that says you're rubbish? How much do you need that to prove them wrong and get ahead?
Oh, no, correct. I mean, one of my oldest friends and clients said Elliot has to have a target. He has to have somebody to aim at. And if he doesn't, then he struggles, right? So there's definitely, I'm not even, it's nice that you put me in the same words as Larry Bird and Michael Jordan. The only time in my life that's ever happened. But I absolutely think anyone successful in life, in business or sport or otherwise, you have to have a target. You have to, I never forget a funny story when, do you remember the footballer Neil Ruddock?
Of course,
Razor Ruddock and Alan Shearer? And they were best friends from Southampton. They were godfathers to each other's children. They lived next door to each other up in Formby. And they played in a Blackburn-Liverpool game. There's a famous clip. And it kicked off between the two of them. And they were best friends. And after the game, Neil thought, well, that's the end of that. And went to outside to get in the car. And as he went to get in Alan's car, because Alan was going to give him a lift home because Blackburn were at home, he stuck his middle finger up and drove off and left him, made him get a cab back. And I think it doesn't matter how the friendship is, when it comes to business, there is, you know, Gordon Gekko said, was it, if you want a friend, buy a dog. And I think you have to have a target. And for me, the big lesson is don't fight internally. You know, the enemy's outside, not inside. And too many times you sometimes fall out with people, or you end up with battles internally in your business that you work with. You know, you can disagree and sometimes violently disagree with each other, but you're a team and the arguments are outside. So yeah, I definitely have that. And the dugout example was one where it's been a painful journey to a good place. But yeah, without doubt, I think you have to have a target.
Yeah. Talking about the enemies on the outside, you're a Gunner, you're an Arsenal fan. People have understood now that whilst you're still running a major company, you've got a whole sideline on the football side. How true is the rumour going around that you were instrumental in bringing that player to Arsenal instead of Tottenham? How true is that? Is that an urban legend?
That's definitely an urban legend, Roger. All I would say is there's been a couple of interesting transfers where I think I might have been helpful. Definitely not instrumental, but
you're in the confessional now.
Helpful with the relations. Yeah, and I'm in a confessional, and the confessional is that I may have been helpful, and I think with Arsenal, as you know, like your beloved Celtic, they could call me tomorrow and ask for a favour and I'd drop everything and help them, right? It's not only that, they're a shareholder in One Football. They've been brilliant to me and to my family over the years. One of the best things last year was taking my dad to watch training, and, you know, 82 years old, and he's sitting there with his chair. The club are a special club. I know we all have our tribal, but Arsenal do things with a bit of class. If they ask me to help, I help. But also I've helped plenty of other clubs, Roger, on things and unlocked a few problems. And so, yeah, there's been one or two transfer related things where I've been helpful. And
you've enjoyed being helpful. The outcome has been very pleasurable to you.
Of course. But listen, if it was the other way round, and someone needed help on a business related thing, one of our rivals, I'd be very happy to help, because I think it's a long game, and not always it has to be just your club. But obviously, on a player that may or may not win the Champions League for us in Budapest in late May, I might have been slightly helpful. I'm also very lucky that the relationships are everywhere across Europe, and sometimes you can put a phone call in and be helpful. And the trust element's very important. That's the best thing that's come from Dugout on One Football, is the trust across the football space.
Well, let's talk about that very, very quickly. You know, this is a sports biz podcast. Let's talk about it very quickly. We can all see where European football is these days, and in my own opinion, is well known. I think it's a little bit of a mess, and you can see that all around. You were the first person, and today I think the only person, to bring all these clubs together under one body. The second person to do that was Andrea Agnelli. at the Super League. What's your view now? I know we always have to be diplomatic, but do you still believe that there is a future for European football, European, not English football, with open leagues, promotion and relegation, and the imbalances country by country?
I have a personal view, not a one football or otherwise corporate view. I think the Super League was necessary. I've said that to you before. I've said that to others. I think the execution of it was appalling. And funny enough, I watched not that long ago that Apple documentary, and when you look at it, it's bonkers how haphazard it was. And I think it will come back in some form. I've said that before. You've seen the Club World Cup. You've seen the money involved around all of this stuff. You know, we're dealing in a very different world now. The interconnectivity of sovereign funds, the interconnectivity of the geopolitical stuff that's happening. These football clubs are global brands of epic proportions with huge amounts at stake. And I think, Roger, as well, you know, I just don't think it's sustainable when the big I know you use Hollywood versus our house. I just think that, you know, you're a neutral in the sense that you're a Celtic fan. You want to watch the big teams play each other. And, you know, you're not in that demographic that everyone thinks, oh, they're young people and blah, blah, blah. You're not, and so am I. You know, do I want to watch a mid-table game in the Premier League? Not particularly, unless it's got something at stake for my football team. No. Sky and others are doing their best to add more games, in massive amounts of more games for the same amount of value. You know, people forget that. You know, if I said to you, I can give you 50% more for the same price, that's not a great direction of travel. And we look across the rest of Europe, and you look in every league, it's not great. You know, you look at the media landscape. So for me, yes, there has to be something, whether that's more of an evolution out of the Champions League, where they squeeze more out of that. The ECA has a big word to say here. I would say, and I've said this to you before, I think the ECA is the emerging power of all three. And I think that's the one to watch carefully, whether that's a deal that gets done. And it's no different to what used to happen when Bernie had to tie up Ferrari at the Concord Agreement in Formula One. Will the big clubs just get more and more of a share of the prize? You look at the new format in the Champions League now, and otherwise it's very skewed that way. And that might be the way it goes. But, you know, I think with certain clubs, and one in particular, this is now something that sees life work. And I personally think, you know, Real Madrid and others will keep pushing. And again, you don't know where FIFA are. You don't know the different elections that are coming up. But yeah, there has to be a change, Roger. There can't be a continued status quo. It's not working. And even the Premier League's coming under more pressure.
Yeah, it is.
It's very different.
The prestige, yeah. Andrea's in Como. Andrea Agnelli's in Como, so I'm sure that'll come up.
Right.
We'll have a good chat. Third question. Who's the person you wish you'd never met?
I'm not going to name them by name, but I'm going to give you a little bit of background. There's actually two of them. They were brothers. And the Brothers Grimm, we'll call them for the sake of this this podcast. And a couple of lessons that came, again, sometimes these things work out badly. But I'm as you probably know, I'm a huge, passionate lover of the United States. I love it. It's been hugely good to me, both personally and professionally. I'm a massive lover of American history. Trudged around most of the Civil War battlefields, just came back and did Concord, Lexington and Bunker Hill up in Massachusetts. I'm everything around that country. And it's been a lucky place for me. And I enjoy dealing with Americans. Probably I enjoy dealing with Americans more than I enjoy dealing with Brits. It just works for me. My father had it. I have it. It's just we have something that we get on well with the Yanks. And so be well aware, like we have, the Brits what the Dutch say about us, that we're too honest to be polite. Sorry, too polite to be honest. That's the other way around for the Dutch. And the Americans, people say they shake hands and they don't mean it. It's just the beginning of negotiation. There's lots of truths to all of it. And these guys were probably, all the things you would throw as the typical ruthless, greedy, enormous amounts of pain. And it taught you a great lesson that you will never make money with bad partners. And so these two, but they were brilliant strategists, which I learned some things from them. You always pick up the good and the bad from these things. And in fact, one of their ideas is now evolving in OneFootball into something that I think will be a really interesting position around a whole technology arm, which I have to credit was originally that person's idea. And but good God, if I never had to see them again, that would be too soon.
Yeah, I think there's enough clues in there. By the way, on OneFootball, what are the, we have a lot of back and forward about companies like OneFootball. There's not many like that. Rights holders with apps and our old friends at the platforms, whether it's Amazon or YouTube. Talk us a little bit about where you see OneFootball going. Really high level. What is your USP? Why should anybody care about OneFootball in this ever-evolving marketplace now? What's it got?
Yeah, you've heard this story a lot with different people saying they've got this, they've got that. What you know is 2.5 years ago, we made sure that we created a no bullshit mantra. Yeah, none of this nonsense, none of the fugazi or fugazi, just absolute raw stuff that we commit, that everything we say we do, we do. So the first thing we did, which, credit to the management team and the employees, is we really, really heavily focused on our user base and making sure we cultivated that into a registered users. Today, you are now by far the largest football app in the world by a country mile. If you dig the numbers up, they're not our numbers. We're the 6th biggest sports app in the world, bigger than ESPN. And without including the Chinese and Indian apps that are out there, which obviously are huge from a scale point of view, we're right in there. We can't be any bigger in terms of size. 32 million registered users. That's an enormous number. And working on that app and making sure that we cultivated that. Well, the second piece of our USP was to not just be a media business. So race to the bottom, advertising is still important. We absolutely want to be in that premier element, the NBC element of it, like around when they sell the Olympic games. And we've held our own very well there. But the big thing was, can we get our user base to start buying things through the app? And that's been the standout knockout thing we've done over the last 18 months. And whether that's, the individual unbundled games, that's been unbelievably successful. We'll have over 400,000 individual people on our app buying live games this calendar year. And that's a big number, Roger, right? And from a standing start, we haven't got a load of premier rights, and, we're not talking you're up against it. We're dealing with long tail, and we're talking about clubs-owned OTT channels, companies like clubs like Napoli. We've knocked it out of the park. We're talking about partnering with broadcasters to reach that young audience. 18 to 34 is 85% of our audience is 18 to 34. These are the people that everyone says you can't get them to spend any money. Well, you can if you give them something they want. The other pieces, of course, is our loyalty program. We launched a token this year. That's gone absolutely as brilliantly as we could have possibly hoped for. And now we're launched Marketplace, which is our giant affiliate business on the products. In terms of memorabilia, you're able to watch a live game, you're able to buy the shirt, all done easily and simply, paid for in an 8-second experience. So I can't tell you how pleased I am with where we've gone on that. The key, though, is a lot of our technology that we've been building is something you can offer to other people. So no different to Meta, no different to Amazon, no different to a lot of the big tech businesses like ByteDance, is our technology arm is starting to get real interest for people looking to purchase some of our products. So imagine OneFootball now, the USP of OneFootball, you've got this giant block of data, which is unrivaled now in the industry. We understand our consumers better. We know what they want to buy. But also our OTT product is the best in the market. It's an 8-second experience. Everyone we go up against, we beat. So we're now selling that to other partners. We've got a technology arm that's going to probably be a far larger revenue generator than even our original media business. So suddenly you've created a very different business than anyone else in sport. And I think any business, whether it's Howden or OneFootball, I think you've got to be a force for good. You've got to try and help the industry, have steely resolve as what you're doing, but being able to solve the problem in the industry. And we're doing that by not taking from it, going back to my early comment, but helping. So I think that's the USP now for us. I don't think anyone else is able to do that. Everyone else can pretend they've got great tech. Everyone thinks they've got this, that, and the other. The next thing, of course, is we've just partnered with Localize, which is an amazing business run by Peter Jones. Peter Jones is Dragon's Den for those in the UK. He's also been on Shark Tank in the US. And this is a business that is going to transform the way clubs can reach their audience. And we can do that both inside OneFootball, but we can also offer that as a direct solution to clubs owned and operated business. And we've got some very big announcements coming out in September on that as well. So what we're doing is solving the end-to-end solution of this drive to direct to consumer. And instead of taking from the industry, we're doing it alongside them. And I have to say, Roger, I don't think it's ever been clearer what we're able to do. Most of the industry never quite work us out. But this has been 2 years in the making, and I think people are starting to sit up and realize what we're finally doing. So yeah, that's in a longer than I would ever like to do it, but that gives you an idea of what we're now doing.
Best explanation of this I've heard on 10 podcasts about OneFootball, including one I did as well. Let me ask you, but in the confessional, what's your exit?
Going back to my earlier comment, the good news now is you're in a business that you're enjoying and having fun, right? It's that moment when you walk in the room and you no longer rely on a bottle of Sassicaia to get someone to do something. You're actually able to do it because they want to work with you. That's a nice moment. And look, the beauty of if someone knocks on our door, and we're certainly in no hurry to do that, it doesn't have to be a media business anymore. You know, that's always a narrow path. We now have businesses that technology businesses are interested in. Anyone who wants to access 32 million 18 to 34-year-olds, you know, there's payment services, there's giant fulfillment companies, all of people that want to unlock that user base all become potential buyers of OneFootball. It's a very, very broad church, Roger, that would want to buy us now. And in fact, we've had some extraordinary conversations already, but we're not in a hurry. You know, we're going to do some amazing things around the World Cup next year. We're super strong in Mexico. The US has really started to come out for us as well. So we're not in a hurry, but if the right thing comes along, of course we'll have a listen. But not relying on media is a big plus.
Big theme, that, not relying on media. And if you guys pull this off, it's so encouraging for the whole industry, because it's one of the themes. If the media dollar isn't there, how do we still have a business? And so, you know, we're all looking at that. Fourth question, what train do you think you missed or you were late for in life?
I was thinking about this. You'll chuckle at this one, because involved in different things. I got a phone call from somebody, and in fact, you'll know him, Willie Hockey, Law Hockey. And Willie said, I'd like you to meet my son, Kenny. And he said he's got this thing called FanDuel, and they're looking for seed funding. And he came and saw me. I can't even tell you the valuation, Roger. And Kenny started talking to me about it. And I was pissing around on a stupid dinosaur thing with a friend of mine to raise money to do a live show experience, a bit like BBC's Walking with Dinosaur. I don't know if you ever took your kids to that. And this was a new version of that. And I was so busy and consumed with trying to raise money for this show, I passed. That was a seed round of FanDuel. And so that was definitely the one. That I missed due to
But why did you pass?
Ridiculous reason.
Why did you pass?
I had too many things going on. And the second one, which is an absolute outrage, is you don't understand it. And I didn't properly understand it. I didn't know enough about DraftKings. Didn't know, because this was obviously going to be the real rival, because DraftKings was the standout, starting to knock it out of the park. And I didn't understand it. And I tend to try and avoid as much as possible, with the exception of the football world, investing in things you didn't understand. But it was more because I had too many things going on. I had this football all-star thing. I had too many things and I didn't pay enough attention to it. So the chase too many rabbits, they all get away, which is try and be disciplined not to say yes to everything.
So how do you, and this is a lesson for a lot of young people again, how do you miss a boat like that, miss a train like that, and not get forever stuck in, what might have been, the world's full of 22-year-old guys with a bit of a beer belly that said, without the cruciate injury at 14, I would have been Wayne Rooney. How do you get past the moment that you got a bit of a kick in the stomach?
I think it's how you create muscle memory, right? So going back to the insurance world, and for our listeners, I'd encourage anyone who ever wants to do it to come into Lloyd's of London, even now, for a day. The last great bastion of face-to-face trading. So there's always another day. You don't win today, but you go in again tomorrow. Same as any marketplace, whether you're selling storm damage filer faxes on Romford Market, or you're working in Lloyd's or anything. You're all, everyone who's worked on a market, tomorrow could be another day. And so I think the way I've got over the misses is there's always another day. There's always something else. And you've got to look at your career in the net. You will not win every battle. You will not get every deal. And instead of saying, look at that one. In fact, I hadn't thought about it, Roger, for years until you asked the question. And I was sitting with my wife. And so that's an important thing, is, put it in the back folder and crack on. And it's a bit like a great striker doesn't dwell on their misses.
That's right. Golfers,
the next one, golfers, the great sports people don't worry about the last 3-pointer they didn't hit. Jordan didn't care about that. He's looking at the next one. Shearer would look at the next chance. He wouldn't dwell. So it's the same in business. Don't dwell on the misses. I have people that are even enormously successful who are torn apart by the ones they didn't do.
That's what I'm asking, because me too.
I don't have that at all. I look at myself very, very fortunate in everything I've been in life, not just in business, but the people I've met, the experiences I've had. That's life, living it richly. Don't dwell on the misses.
So linked to question 4 is obviously the flip side of that. Question 5: what sliding door were you just in time for? Sliding door you just got through before it closed.
I mean, from the area I was raised, you were always told cash is king, right? You get your cash. You must get cash. That's very short term in that sense, even though a lot of other things are long term. My view on compensation was always cash is king. And I remember turning down a lot of equity in something in May 2001. Because I said, you can't spend shares in Tesco's. And that was my comment back. I can't tell you how much that cost me at the time. But the train that I was lucky enough, and I was late to it, but just got it, was the value of equity and owning a piece of a business. The true path to real wealth creation, in my opinion, is having an equity position. And it's something that completely baffles me in the sports world. So many team owners who want to grow their own equity value in a club do not build shadow equity schemes or otherwise to incentivize and bring in the best people. I don't get it. And retain the best people.
People are
so
players.
A huge amount of
people
sliding.
Are players or both.
Players are a bit like movie actors, right? I'm talking about people who can build the business side of sport, Roger. Players are paid enough, and you could argue sometimes image right over co-ownership and otherwise is a form of equity. But if you're a top operator who gets offered an opportunity to go and work in sport and you don't currently work in it, but could make a real difference in, say, licensing or something that sports football clubs are not particularly good at, then why would you leave the brilliant business that you're at and give up your equity? Look at what's currently happening in AI and the amount of money that's going around from Meta and Amazon and others and the amount of money that's being offered in equity and cash to bring in the best brains. So I was lucky because when I left AYNE in 2011, I was given a chance to work at RK Harrison, which I very nearly didn't do because it was an equity play. And I took it more because I needed to take it at the time. It was the best offer on the table. And I took it. And then 2.5 years later, we merged with Howden. David Howden came along. It was called Hyperion at the time. That business, at the time, the combined revenue on that business was £150 million. The two businesses a decade ago. We've just gone past £3.7 billion 10 years later. And of which Howden has 6,000 employee shareholders. You know, it's a better version of John Lewis, I guess, is the way I describe it. And we'll have over 20,000 employee shareholders by 2030. And having an equity position, you behave differently. You behave as a business owner. You think differently. Not only that, so I was incredibly lucky because I nearly said no to that deal. And that was the train I just made, but was the best train I've ever got on.
Great answer. That leads me on to a follow-up on that one. You Howden, you've grown that business also through acquisition. You've got on your cap table what people refer to now as private equity. Do you have a view, because you've been so close to it, both sides of the table, about where private equity sits now in the corporate and finance landscape?
I just slight correction. Howden has done acquisition, but it's also a huge organic growth driver. So we're averaging out over the last 5 years at 16% organic growth. What we do, Roger, is we buy businesses and we merge with businesses that want to accelerate. And it's quite a cute trick. And private equity enables you to do that, certainly at certain stages in your cycle. And so we don't buy businesses just because we want to create operational leverage or arbitrage. We really just focused on businesses saying, right, I'm growing at 15 on my own. I'm growing at 30 if I merge with you. Your paper's better than mine. We really only ever do deals with paper, some cash, but we really mix it up. So, and then what happens is you then layer that over the top with brilliant talent, because you can hire the best talent because you're attracting them with the best equity. So I just wanted to make sure there's definitely an M&A piece. I think the insurance industry is a brilliant area for private equity, because if you're on the insurance broking side, you're throwing off a lot of cash. You know, it's a perfect private equity model. And that's why there's been such a drive for both sovereigns, major pension funds, and private equity in the industry. And you know, it's the best kept secret in the world, really, insurance. It's the cradle of capitalism. So nothing happens without us. So the industry and the world's becoming more risky. So it's a perfect play. I think private equity on the sports side is a different story. But it's kind of a longer, more nuanced answer, because private equity, I think, God, sports sounds amazing. You know, we can get into this. It's untapped. It's no different to an American, very successful NFL owner deciding to buy a club in Italy or the Premier League. They look at it and they're absolutely right. On paper, these look the most extraordinary upside assets, where you can put some investment into them. There's 4 or 5 revenue streams that can explode, and you can double, and get a massive IRR on your business. The reality is that sport doesn't work like that. And when you get into it, you could have the local fan base that tries to burn down your training ground, or they refuse to give you the new stadium, or is somebody looking for an extra incentive to approve the new stadium. There's who's a fan, and there's so much emotion that comes into sport that I think it makes the execution of that upside very, very difficult. And I find private equity make that mistake time and time again. And I think that's been something that is not the best marriage, is private equity into sport. You've seen it with TV rights deals. We could have you and I could have said to them, that's not going to work because TV rights are going to come under pressure. They also, there's been deals done where clubs absolutely promise you that they're going to take that money and do what you've told them to do with it, and they want to buy the new left back because that's what happens in sport. So I think private equity has a real role to play in the right sectors, and I'm not always convinced that private equity and sport are a marriage made in heaven.
Perfect. Last question, Elliot, and it's maybe the most philosophical of the lot. What person do you owe most to, and maybe you haven't thanked enough to date?
You had me on this one. I was thinking about this for about 2 or 3 days, and I think there's three buckets to it for me. The first is 2 friends who lent me 20 grand when I was completely skint 15 years ago. I could never thank them enough. That really changed my life. I was in a tricky position, and those 2 people, I couldn't thank them enough. I've thanked them many times, but there's not enough time left on earth, Roger, to keep thanking those 2 people. So those 2 people changed it. I think there's 2 bosses who made me a better human, who they know who they are, and they probably I've not thanked them enough. But
do they know who they are? Do they know who they are?
I think so. Yeah, they do know. They know who they are. And they've definitely made me a better person in the last 15 years. So, and without doubt, now I've also, as a result of that, I think I've become a better business person, which helped everybody. So it just shows you that the importance of leadership, not management. If leadership is about making sure you understand, you bring the best out of people, and you also sometimes have to invest some time in some of the more problematical people who have the potential to be even better. And I think that's something you can't thank enough. And I think the third one are the terrible bosses and terrible people who I've had a few of those who are selfish, not great humans, and I've got a cloud of darkness over them. I definitely want to thank them because they've made you absolutely focus on not being them, and making sure you avoid ever doing that. It's the same as people who've grown up in difficult environment want to do everything they can not to be like that person. And it's the same in business. Take those worst bits and make sure they never come into your game. And so I definitely want to thank a few of them, because without those experiences, you don't know what good is. And being able to see what life is really like and having those experiences is very important. And I think the last one, definitely, I think being happy, and you'll know this, Roger, being happy in your personal life is a hugely important thing. And, my wife, and being able to be around her, and also being able to be in a settled environment makes you a better business person. If you have chaos in your personal life, you will not, doesn't matter how you think you're putting into the back of your mind, you won't. So definitely would thank my wife, lastly, for being in a happy environment.
Wonderful. Elliot Richardson, thank you for joining me in the Confessional. Take care, safe travels, and to quote Dave Allen, may your God go with you. Thank you.
Yeah, much appreciated. Thanks, Roger. All the best.